Since moving back to a temperate climate here in Zone 8, that is temperate. We can't grow bananas, we can't grow coconuts, and we do get cold. We get multiple frosts that take out anything tropical. But since moving back to a temperate climate, the winter has become a kind of a cycle in between growing. So that downtime cycle is the time we have been using to build soil fertility. And one of the things that we're really going into hard this year is biochar.
I like to dig, diggity dig. I like to diggy, 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 dig. I like to dig every day.
I'm standing in a trench that I almost certainly dug with this shovel by myself and not with any other implement that you might see in the frame. It was definitely this shovel. This trench right here is our new biochar burn trench. There's a huge pile of limbs. Can you see it? Look at that huge pile of limbs. Just look at it. A couple of folks said, why don't you just let all those rot down? Well, I'll tell you why. Because ain't nobody got time for that. No, we're going to burn it. We're going to turn it into long-term stable carbon in the form of charcoal. And we're gonna burn it in this pit right here. Those limbs came from the county when they were cleaning up the lines. I said, why don't you just start dumping them back here in this field? And they're like, well, you know these aren't wood chips. Everybody wants wood chips. They don't want whole limbs. And I said, oh, I want whole limbs. I want whole limbs. Because if for no other reason, it gives me an excuse to light huge fires. Pine is not great in some ways.
Moving along. I used to go on that side.
That one's pretty wet. All right, that's good. That lit up really easily. Good. Good deal. I first got into biochar because of my friend Rick, who had talked to me about terra preta soils and this mysterious soil of the Amazon that had a bunch of carbon in it. And I liked the idea. I played with the idea a little bit. And I saw Stephen Edholm was doing some things with the idea. But where I had moved down in the Caribbean, we had rich volcanic clay loam. There was no need to do any kind of long-term soil improvement on it. Put a little humus in it and it was great. It would grow crops if you didn't do anything. Stuff would just grow. But we moved to Alabama here and the soil is this really dead gray grit. And I've done some experiments with terra preta, trying to mix everything in, trying to get the kitchen scrap wastes and the clay shards and the biochar and layers of clay and all kinds of other things sort of mixed in. And it seems like the real big key to it is that biochar. And as I've been talking with Steve Solomon and working on some different projects with him, Steve Solomon is an old school gardener. And he's done a lot of experimentation with different methods, and he's really interested in getting minerals into the soil so you have the most nutrient-dense produce possible. And our soil here, the minerals just move right through it. When it rains, it's gone. If I throw down triple 13, right, like the farmers do around here, you're gonna throw down some triple 13 when you plant your crop. It's gone. We'll get 8-inch rain events, and it's just gone. So we needed a way to get the minerals to stick around, and I don't really want to play drug dealer with the soil. Here's your hit, here's your hit, here's your hit. I want the soil to actually be alive and have something in it. But between the heat and the rain and the geology of this gritty sand, compost doesn't stick around very well. I'm building humus, I'm making compost, experimenting with moving animals through the system. We needed a form of carbon that would increase the exchange capacity of the soil, meaning that the minerals become available, and that would stick around and not just burn out really quickly with all the rain and the heat and the just abundance of soil life here that just chews through all that stuff. And biochar seems to be the answer. So we're making a ton of it in the winter when everything else is not happening. The trick is to get a bed of coals at the bottom. So this area here is kind of collapsing in. We'll get the coals down to get that first layer really solid. You probably loaded it a little high, but you know, you get excited and then you start throwing more and more stuff in. But we'll get this first layer down here and it's turning white, turning into coals, and then you just keep stacking on top of it. And the subsequent layers choke out the first layer and you just get coals way deep in there, and it just slowly cooks them all. But they're choked off from as much oxygen, the stuff on top tends to burn. And we were doing this in a trench, you know, 1/4 this size, all this last winter. We decided, you know what, we need to do this seriously, especially now that we have a huge pile of sticks and we don't have to cut all the sticks and drag our way through the woods looking for them. This is going to be awesome. So we're now at that point where it's broken down into the coals are turning white. We loaded for probably an hour. We kept throwing branches on top of the original branches that we put in. And now at this point, we have this beautiful bed of coals. And beneath, the stuff beneath is probably black and some of it is probably still wood. But we're choking it off, choking off the supply of oxygen. And then you just keep layering on top. And we just keep throwing things on it now. So I've deliberately, we just loaded and loaded and loaded and let it burn and fall and burn and plow and collapse and fall until it's like filled this thing up. I mean, there's probably almost 3 feet of coals down through here. And then I stopped. Okay, that's enough. Now we're gonna let it burn until it makes a nice white bed. We're starting to turn into ash on top. And then it's time to do the same thing again, because this trench is so big. We can load this thing and load this thing and load this thing. And what I'm guessing is if this happens out right how I think, we'll get about 200 to 300 gallons of finished biochar, which is way, way better. One of our problems we've had though is that this stuff in the pile over here is all interconnected. There are grapevines in there, and the branches are all sticking to each other, so you come in here and you start yanking, and it's like stuff is all jammed in, and sometimes you start pulling on one, and there's just nothing you could do. So what I was doing earlier, which you should have seen on film, it was amazing, but the baby needed to be cared for, so I lost my camera lady. See, like this, okay? That is jammed way up in there. I'm not gonna even try to keep pulling that thing because it doesn't feel good. But what we were doing is we were taking the tractor and just digging to the side and stick the bucket underneath and pull. And often if there was a bunch of vines and stuff, it would start to rip and they would pull apart and come out. You see all this? These are wild muscadine vines. And a lot of these branches that were cut by the side of the road, they're just kind of tied together with these things. And now another thing about this, right now, there's a lot of these kind of medium, big size sticks. I don't really want those in so much. If they incidentally, we get a piece of it that's a little thick along with a bunch of small branches, that's fine. But at this point, I want to just keep burning small stuff on top of that coal bed so it's slowly kind of accreting upwards and not giving me big hunks of log that might not convert all the way down. So all this stuff right here, you know, these things are good. I just throw these guys on. And it's so hot underneath there that they just burn up and they start to collapse in pretty quickly. I did a video down in Fort Lauderdale where we did biochar. We did quite a bit of biochar actually, considering the small backyard and what we were doing. And we just had one of those little burn pits like you would have a few friends over and burn inside of. It's probably technically in Fort Lauderdale. You're not supposed to be burning in the backyard. You know, like you couldn't do this sort of thing in a normal suburban backyard, which is why I don't live in suburbia anymore, because I gotta be free. But we've just burned in a backyard. So if you had a backyard where you could do a little burning, you can always contain it inside of a, you could even like use a little barbecue grill or something and just start cutting a bunch of little sticks and stuff. I hate this stuff. Start getting a whole bunch of little sticks and stuff, and there it goes. Stack them in there and burn, and as you go, you just kind of make layers that choke out the previous layer. But a pit like this, if you've got a little bit more space, this is my favorite, and I can't take credit for this. No. Stephen Edholm gave me this idea. He did a video like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago called "Stop Burning Your Brush."
You know, it just frustrates me so much to watch people burning brush into ashes. I have friends around here, I'm just like, stop, you know, stop burning your brush, just make charcoal, light it from the top and spray it with a hose. It doesn't have to be perfect. You could lose half of it, you know, like by managing it poorly or something like that, and you're still going to end up with a bunch of charcoal. And a lot of the soils around here just aren't that good. We have thin mountain soils. We're not, you know, we're not gardening in these deep valley soils that are, you know, have built up over time with the best stuff that washed out of the mountains here. We're dealing with a little, my soil's decent, but you know, it's never going to be super rich unless I do something like this. And what else is like this? Nothing that I know of.
That's the Skill Cult channel. If you're not subscribed to Skill Cult, you better go subscribe to Skill Cult. I've got a better camera than he does now, and it's kind of weighing on him. And he needs more subscribers so he can get money for a better camera, because honestly, he's really, really good at what he does, and he should have a better camera, so go subscribe to him. But this sort of a, you know, dig a trench in the ground and burn in it is the easiest way. And I'm not buying that, you know, this isn't real biochar, you know. People will tell you this is like, it's got to be pyrolysis under, you know, there's got to be oxygen deprivation and this and that and the other thing. I don't care. I don't care. We did burns, open burns. We soaked the resulting charcoal in a nutrient solution last year, buried it in the garden beds. The garden beds did way better in the areas that had that soaked char. All right, biochar. Let's grab a radish here. Hey, look at that puppy. Look at that color. That's gorgeous. All right, and we have very, very nice looking turnips in this bed. Look at the mycorrhizal fungi growing on the base of that. Isn't that interesting? Plants and fungi together. I'm convinced enough that we're doing it again, but now we're doing it on a bigger scale. And for these couple of months now, when it's going to be way too cold and we don't have the ability to grow anything, we are going to grow soil instead. We're going to sequester this carbon and stick it right into the garden beds and get it in the ground before we plant our spring crops. It's gonna be awesome. Wow, that's amazing. Coffee delivery from an angel of God. God sent one of his holy messengers to bring us some coffee. How would you rank this lens?
I think I would like to try it under different conditions first before I rank it, because I don't feel like this is a great test for me to really understand.
It's very hard to see what's going on.
Yeah. I've had fun with it, but that doesn't mean I've really given it a very good test run.
I have no idea if it's in focus.
I did my best.
So there are multiple benefits to biochar. It kind of acts like humus in the soil. It increases the exchange capacity. It also holds on to nutrients like a battery. And as we discovered from our first round of experiments with it, the crops that we grew with the biochar had better flavor and they were larger. Biochar.
Are you going to do this in the summer with different peppers?
That's not a bad idea. We planted reapers in 12 different beds.
Oh.
Mmm, good texture.
Mm-hmm.
Good flavor.
Mm-hmm.
Best so far.
This one is kind of sweet.
Mm-hmm. It is sweet. The bricks level's got to be higher.
I like the crunch. It's got a.
And it's got a little burn to it. Like you can, there's a little bit of burn, but
it's juicier too. It's juicier, but still dense enough to be crispy.
Remember, this biochar was soaked with Dynagrow, so it's got the 16 extra nutrients in it. That is very good.
My favorite so far. Yeah, that's really good.
They were larger, sweeter, more water in them, and they just had a better all-around flavor than the ones we grew without biochar. We tried a whole bunch of different amendments as an experiment, and we did a bed very heavily with soaked biochar, that is charged biochar. We'll get to that in a minute. But we planted in this bed, and it seems like it's sort of a slow release little battery in the soil that lets those nutrients back out and the roots get into it, and it just makes everything work better.
Sitting here worrying in the backseat of a car, worrying about the driver and hoping we aren't going far. 'Cause I don't have a seatbelt and don't want to get thrown out of the windshield of the car, where I'm worrying as I'm sitting in the backseat of a car. Worrying as we're fishing mouth the bones in fishes that could get caught in my throat. And I'm worrying about the fishing licenses of the other fishermen fishing in our boat. If I ain't one of the fishes and the boat's got stuck in my throat, will the police throw me down on the ground as I choke and I choke and I choke and I choke and I choke? This world is a terrifying place. So I try, yes I try, yes I try, yes I try to keep a smile on my face.
Basket. Good. It's gonna be 22 degrees tonight. So that means these row gardens that we planted at the end of 2021 are officially over. I showed you a little bit in a recent video the damage that happened from the previous frost, if you can see it here. This is what they look like. That's not good. And it may get down to 21 and it's supposed to hold there for multiple hours, which is too cold. It's over. But we had a kind of a long, warm December. I mean, I think we even had a day up in the 80s. And, you know, so we got a good bit of harvest. This is not as nice as I would have liked. I would have loved to have seen these things really take off and us get bigger heads. But it'll get recycled back into the soil, and seeds are cheap. We just came down here. I mean, it took us, what would you say, an hour or two probably to seed this entire area? Probably an hour or two. We just kind of went down. I had a few kids and went down and seeded the rows. Spent about 10 bucks on seeds probably, and got a good pile of cabbages. We pulled a lot of turnips out of here already, and you will still get cabbages. But the broccoli decided to bolt early, so that broccoli is just, that's bad. I don't know why it decided to bolt, maybe because it was warm, maybe because of day length, but it's over. This is over, and I can finally rest. And by rest, I mean make tons and tons of biochar. That's not bad. How small can a cabbage be before it's not worth actually pulling? So that's not what we want to see there. They'll let it rot, pull the outer leaves off, and it's pretty slimy. Underneath it's usually okay. This is the sort of thing we should do under the sink inside, but I don't think it's going to grow out properly, especially not if we get a frost of 21 degrees for multiple hours. It's over. There's enough cabbage in there for a little bit of single serving coleslaw. All this stuff looks so good not that long ago. There were no frost burns. It was like a long, cool, endless growing season, but had to come to an end. These cabbages struck me as we were harvesting them, putting them aside. They're good. It's a great tight head. They're very sweet. They taste delicious. They're just small, and they remind me of the dry season cabbages we used to get. We get cabbages like this by the side of the road down in the Caribbean. Gets to the dry season, the cabbages were small. A lot of them were grown just with the irrigation of rainfall, and you had these tiny little cabbages for sale, and then suddenly there would just usually not be any cabbages for a while, and then the rainy season would start again and it'd cool off a little bit, and then we get nice big cabbages again. Kind of reminds me of that, just like growing season changes. Beets are only a semi-hardy crop. You can see how the leaves took a lot of damage already in the previous cold. That was damage at probably about 24 degrees. And so we know that 21 degrees being held, that's the end of the beets. Beets are probably going to be better for us in spring. We have very unpredictable weather here. It swings back and forth between being hot, cold, pouring rain, drought, pouring rain, hot, cold, and you just don't know from year to year. Sometimes you try things one year, like you get tons and tons and tons of stuff, and then the next year you don't get much at all. But you gotta try anyways. There's a lot of I guess you could call it luck involved with farming, where you just, you got to get it in the ground, and you trust that it will grow, and sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Some years you get something that's really great and you just get a huge pile. You're like, I am the king of growing tomatoes. I got so many tomatoes. And then the next year, you don't know. It's in God's hands. You really just don't know what you're gonna get. And I am glad that we are getting some beets, because Rachel makes some pickled beets that are fantastic, and these are gonna be good for that. They're not like farmer's market worthy necessarily, but they've got some good minerals in them, and they're gonna pickle really nicely. They're gonna be good for us. Give me the chickens. Oh, there's a good one. Won't win any beauty contest. Is that what we got? Yep. As we played around with different mineral combinations and we looked at, well, let's just see. Okay, we'll put down some lime and some triple 13, right? I mean, old Alabama gardener, he does fine. And we tried that, and man, it just burns out fast, and the vegetables were not particularly good. Our soil doesn't want to hold it. We don't have that brown dirt that OAG had. And we tried tilling under the alfalfa pellets, and that works really well for a short period of time, and then it burns out, and then you're back to dirt. And we have put mulch down, and that does well for a while, but you have to keep replenishing it. So the appeal of the biochar is that it sticks around for a long time. Quite a few people have said, why don't you just compost that pile? the humus doesn't stick. It doesn't stay. We could compost a huge pile of sticks and branches and stuff, but it just doesn't stick around. It's not going to stick. It burns out. It's the geology of this is sandy, gritty, burned out unless it's got permanent scrub oak and sparkleberry and stuff on it. It just burns out. And so the appeal to the biochar is the permanence, or at least the semi-permanence of the system. And we can put it down, we can put it in the ground and maybe improve the gardens for years to come. The exchange capacity, the life in the soil, the drainage, the je ne sais quoi of the soil. It's going to be amazing. And those first few beds that we did where we put it in there, it really was just so much better. And we're going to keep doing that and just see what happens, because I have a feeling that the areas that we're doing this in, if we get results like we did in our small test plots, it's going to be very exciting in years to come. And we've thrown compost down and the compost is gone, and then we've thrown compost down and the compost is gone. And you throw triple 13 down and triple 13's gone. And it's like extractive farming. You're yanking the crops out of the ground and feeding them and feeding them and feeding them and pulling them from the ground. But are we really feeding the soil? Are we really building soil? We're building soil for a short period of time and then it reverts to geology. But what if this could change the geology? That's what I'm excited about. And that's why I'm doing the Terra Preta experiments as well as the biochar. All right, so while I was over harvesting, we let this burn down for a while. And it's all burned white on top there. And this is like, it's ready to go. I need a better tool. You know what separates us from the animals? Microwaves. No animal has ever invented a microwave. Except for some of the dinosaurs. And look what that got them. They're all dead. Alright, let's take this out of here. So I don't want these in here. These will go back in the next one. That's a stick. Let's see what we look like under here. See all those coals? We should have just solid, like, trash cans and trash cans of coals in here. You see that? Woo, it's so hot. Now, there's bound to be some woody pieces in there that didn't burn through, but this is lazy man's biochar. I don't need everything to perfectly pyrolyze. I mean, come on. What am I, Hephrastes? Okay, let's do this. This is the fun part. I know it's gonna relight unless I dig it out. It's so hot. I ended up burning away half a batch once because I thought I had it out. Soaked it and soaked it and soaked it and soaked it. And then came back out the next day and it was a big puddle of ash in the middle, and that was it. With a little char around the outside. Look at that. That would relight just right there. Another benefit to biochar that I have read about but I haven't actually seen myself is that biochar acts sort of like a condominium development, a super complicated condo development for bacteria and fungi, microlife in the soil. So there's this pore structure in the charcoal that's got all of this huge amount of surface area and a huge amount of little pores where things can live in it. And so you've got soil life, and instead of the soil life, you know, running around and living under bridges and that sort of thing, it moves into the biochar. They've got all this nice little cell structure, which is the leftover cell structure of the wood that has burned away. There's all these beautiful little pores, and the life of the soil moves in there, and then it becomes a bunker of soil life, which overall improves the entire biome of the soil. This has been the largest biochar burn officially that we have ever done at once. There's a bunch of it right there, and there's a bunch of it in front of me that's just, it goes a lot deeper. I can just keep shoveling and shoveling and shoveling. There's a lot, probably 2 more feet of char. We're gonna get a good area done. So that area that I was harvesting out of, where we had all the row gardens, if we take this and soak it and till it through there, I think we're gonna have some pretty impressive spring gardens. And if we do a few more of these, I mean, we could do 40 more burns like this with that pile back there. Maybe 100, I don't know, it's crazy. It looks like we didn't even touch that pile, and we were dragging and pushing and dragging all afternoon from when it was super bright to now the sun's gone down. That's a lot of char, and that's a lot of potential soil fertility there. Thanks for joining me. If you haven't burned char before, I love this method. It's really easy. It takes no infrastructure. I don't like this baking a thing inside of another thing by burning wood to heat the wood and all that kind of stuff. I'm not interested in that. I like to just get stuff done and not have to burn things to get things and stuff. So this trench method, it really appeals to me. It's very simple, and we get a lot of char out of it. If you had a small backyard and you did a trench like this, say you know, maybe your friend's got some space, or there's a local farmer or something that would let you burn a brush pile this way, it's a real easy way to do it. Dig that trench, burn it down, get all that char, and then when it's cool, you could load it up and you could do your whole backyard. And you might end up with decades worth of soil fertility because you did this. One potential problem with biochar, however, is biochar soaks up the minerals in the soil. Just like if you take activated charcoal, right? You've eaten something you shouldn't have. You ate that tuna and mayonnaise sandwich, and it was in the back of your car for just a couple days too long. And you ate it anyways, and you're upset, you know, you're not feeling very well. And then your buddy's like, dude, have you tried activated charcoal? My mom always gives that to our dog, right? And so you eat the activated charcoal, and it soaks up some of the mayonnaise molecules, the fetid mayonnaise molecules, and it helps you feel better, right? So activated charcoal is used in filtration and all kinds of other stuff because it's like a sponge, it just pulls it all in. Now, if you were to just burn that biochar and then till it into the ground, it will soak up what is in the ground already. Now, after a couple of years, it's probably going to be just fine. Everything will sort of even out, and it'll start to improve the soil. But if you don't soak it first, it's kind of like tilling a bunch of leaves or mulch into the ground. It's going to particularly drain the nitrogen out of the soil, and you're going to have some problems. Things are just not going to grow very well. So an important part of making biochar is what we're doing with getting it and soaking it. There are a lot of different ways you can charge the biochar, and we have very little actual scientific data that I found on any of them. Some people soak it in urine. Well, that's a lot of urine. Like if you're making biochar, I mean, you have to be saving it, maybe, I don't know, saving it for like months or something. You can also just take a nutrient solution like Dynagrow, Miracle-Gro, Peter's Plant Food, that kind of thing, and put it in there and soak it so it just absorbs all those nutrients first. You can make compost teas. You could use like my Dave's Fetid Swamp Water. I've done that. I've taken like old turnip soup and kelp meal and fish emulsion and all that kind of stuff and just put it in a barrel. But the idea is to just put it in something that's nitrogenous and hopefully has a lot of minerals in it and let it soak it up. So when that goes into the ground, it doesn't drain the soil of nutrients, but it has that battery effect. And I'm not really concerned at this point of charging it with the right microbes and charging it with fungi. You know, some people are putting it in, you know, in a bubbling tank with a bunch of, you know, compost and doing this compost tea, like, we're going to populate the condominium. I'm not going to worry about that to begin with. I'm going to let the soil do that. My main goal is to get it in the ground now, and then the soil life can find it when it finds it. If you build it, they will come. At least that's what I believe. And in the grocery row gardens, the areas where I've put the charcoal are looking really good, and the plants are much happier than in the row gardens where I don't have it, which is why we're putting all this stuff in the row gardens.
Worry about the check in the letter that I put in the box where they get the mail. Will the furniture company get it in time? And if not, will I go to jail? Will they come and get the dresser and the bed and the chair? Will they come and take me too? 'Cause I don't wanna go there. So I'm worrying about the check and the letter that I put in the box where they get the mail. This world is a terrifying place. So I try, yes I try, yes I try, yes I try to keep a smile on my
I actually made a biochar grinder based on Herrick Kimball's design. You may have seen the video on that. It's a incinerator that's mounted to a table, and I want to find a way to, you know, kind of run some water into it so it perpetually runs through. I would like to take nutrient-rich water and run it through as it grinds, then grind it all down into dust. But I found with this big trench that we're burning, there's a range of sizes. You get some pieces that are about this big, and then you get pieces that are just down to dust size, because we're putting in these entire branches. So there's some of it is like fluff from the leaves and from small sticks, and little itty bitty pieces that are all kind of smashing down as it burns and it sinks, and it burns and it sinks, and you choke off the oxygen from the top and it goes down. And then some of it is just, you know, those big pieces of stick that haven't broken up. So I'm thinking the size is not uniform. You got big pieces, you got little pieces, and whatever's the right size, we're bound to have it in that mix. And when we're doing it on a larger scale, it's hard to just grind it all. I don't really feel like you know, just going through and just grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding for hours. Instead, I'm just going to take it and till it in as it is and trust that over time, as it gets tilled, as the soil life works on it, the bigger pieces are probably going to break down a little bit. Or maybe they'll just be like super condominium developments. We don't really know. We can look at what our results are, but there's a lot of variables in how this is working. There's a lot of variables in soil and in minerals and in soil life and how different plants react to different things. And so this whole thing is this just crazy, glorious experiment, and we're getting some good results so far, but we don't know for sure. If anybody tells you they know everything for sure about biochar, they don't. They just don't. I certainly don't. I'm just a backyard experimenter, and you can be a backyard experimenter too. We had chickens in here. We were brooding chicks in here, and this is mostly like manure and feed and hay. That's amazing. It's all in there. And so what I'm going to do is just use some of that to charge the biochar. Instead of just dumping it out in the compost pile like I would normally do, I'll just, well, you'll see. I will show, not tell. We're going way down to the end road. How strong do you feel?
Oh,
Good. Good. possible so the liquid stays in it. I got this thing for 20 bucks, this horse trough. I think you're supposed to be like 100. Who knows? It's been inflation over the last year. They're probably $5,000 right now. But the reason I got it for 20 bucks is because it had this big gash in the side, damaged goods, like it looks like it got hit by a forklift or something. So I'm just sticking some silicone on it. Put some silicone on the outside and some silicone on the inside. I didn't need it to hold water until now. I was just using it for a chicken brooder. So the chicks hang out in there and they put a light in there and the birds have this beautiful little idyllic nursery, little cute peeping birds, and then the 2-year-old comes and talks to them every day, and you know, like the farm stuff that everybody loves. But we ate all those birds. No, I'm just kidding. All those birds are out, grown up enough, feathered out, and they're out in the main chicken area now. So we just have to repair this. There we go. Now that will hold water easily tomorrow. No problem. Yeah, it's easy to pull when it's not full. Look at that big pile of char we made.
Could it be a water? If it's in something, it's heavy.
Water's very heavy.
Like a lot of it?
Yes, water's heavy. Definitely.
Ew.
Which shovel do you want?
Well, which one do you want?
I'll take the scary one, this one, and you can take the normal one.
Okay.
You can see the structure of the wood still in this one. See the grain? It's interesting. If I was into macro photography, I would just take pictures of biochar all day. All day long.
Here is one of my clay mobiles I'm making, and this one is the shooter. And this one's not a shooter. There's more than a normal mobile set.
Get set. Go! Hey! You can take that one over to where the soaking trough is in the row gardens. I've got another destination for this batch. got this cool light. Can't find out, like, we can't figure out what setting would actually look like a natural light, and it's late in the day as I'm throwing this char around the chicken coop. So we're just gonna cycle through it and we'll pretend like we're in the chicken disco. Or you know those ones that they put at the bottom of palm trees at resorts? I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. I love those things. Those lights that cycle through different colors, get that natural rainbow look to the palms. Anyhow, I decided we made so much char, we could work some of the char, we could charge it right into the compost that goes on the garden by throwing this into our chicken house. It'll soak up the manure, that'll fix the nitrogen issues, and at the same time, it's getting all mixed up and it's kind of gonna make it smell nice in here. It already smells nice because we've got a lot of carbon material in here, but just kind of have it constantly cycling through in the compost, and it's getting charged with all the micronutrients and all the micro life, all the bacteria and everything that are in here. And of course we come in here and we throw in wood chips and grass clippings and corn stalks and everything at different seasons, so all that material will get mixed into it too. So we'll have all of this char being made into compost and getting sifted through and charged at the same time. It's just kind of like a slower way to do it than soaking it, but maybe it will give us more micro life rather than just the minerals that I get out of my soaking batches. I like that kind of warm color. Now the green's good too. It's very natural. Do you guys think it's natural? Please leave a comment below. Do you like my chicken disco? Yes or no? So the kids apparently lost my other fork, but I have this fork from Easy Digging, which I really like. Don't point it at your eye! That's bad. So this works. You know, you could use a fork, a broad fork, a tiller, whatever. The idea is to just work it into the soil. And so I try to work it down to 4 to 6 inches deep, and that just kind of covers it over, and I figure it's less likely to just burn all the nutrients out of it, and it's also in a spot where the fungi and the bacteria can move into it. After 2 weeks of soaking, I just put it in the ground, and you know, you probably could soak it longer or less. I'm not doing a huge test of this thing, but I figure if it hasn't soaked it up by then, well, you better get to it, because that's really a long time to wait to put it in. But I'll put all through these beds. The beds that I've put it in have done really, really well, and these single row gardens out here are pretty poor soil, and I'm hoping this is going to replace the need for having to just compost all the time. I'll just fork them in, and maybe that's the last application we have to make. So far, so good. So we pulled out the remnants of the fall garden, the long, warm December that gave us a harvest we didn't quite expect, and then sudden, brutal cold that took away the harvest we were kind of hoping for. It was an interesting season, but it's done now, and I had put in compost and alfalfa pellets and minerals and stuff into that soil, and it did well. But I know that it won't continue to do well because that stuff is already burning up or burned up. And the leaves were already starting to get a little yellow, and it was starting to look like it was a little bit hungry. And so I'm going to take that ground, and I think that with this application of char in it, when we put it together again in the spring, we're going to see some differences. And I think it's going to be beautiful. And I hope that you are willing to experiment, and if not, at least you can watch along and see what I'm doing with my experiments, because when it comes to spring and we put in our spring gardens down there in that really bad area that we haven't improved much, and we see how it does, I think it'll be pretty interesting. And I hope you join me. Thanks for watching. Catch y'all next time. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. The more subscribers we have, the more likely I am to keep doing this. And by this, I mean filming with vintage lenses and talking about whatever weird stuff happens to be going on in the garden, and dragging my wife out in the cold to do esoteric stuff, to keep a huge, vast horde of strangers entertained. That's my goal, and I'm glad you're here for it. Catch y'all next time. And until then, may your thumbs always be green.